Welcome to today's Explainer. We're jumping right into something absolutely fascinating today. We're going to break down a 2026 research paper from Anthropic that basically acts like a detective investigation into how artificial intelligence is actually shifting the economy right now. No wild predictions today. We are strictly looking at real ground-level data. Because it's the pressing question on almost everyone's mind, isn't it? Is AI coming for your job right now? There's just so much noise and anxiety surrounding the whole topic, but today we promise to cut straight through that hype using hard, verifiable facts. We're going to see what the numbers actually have to say about AI and, well, your livelihood. Okay, let's dive into this. In economics, tracking cause and effect is actually pretty easy when the shocks are huge and sudden. Think about the COVID-19 pandemic. We saw these sudden, massive unemployment spikes that literally left no room for alternative explanations. But the AI shock, it's entirely different. It's stealthy. It's really gradual. The effects can easily be hidden by the normal business cycle, making it look a lot more like the dawn of the internet, or maybe the China trade shock. And because this AI wave is so stealthy, economists need a completely new toolkit to track it properly. So here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the AI job panic, then look at measuring real AI exposure, check out the most exposed jobs, see who faces the most risk, and wrap up with early evidence on employment. Starting right off with Section 1, the AI job panic, and exactly why past predictions have failed. As the Anthropic research points out, historical economic predictions are notoriously difficult. The researchers note that the track record of past approaches really gives reason for humility. Even with the benefit of hindsight, the impact of major economic disruptions is often pretty murky. Decades later, economists are actually still debating the employment effects of industrial robots and the China trade shock. A prominent past attempt to measure job offshoreability identified a quarter of U.S. jobs as vulnerable. But 10 years later, most of those jobs actually had healthy employment growth. So, that sets up exactly why a new, much more grounded approach is necessary to really understand AI. Which brings us to Section 2, measuring real AI exposure, and taking a look at this new toolkit. To do this, the researchers developed a brand new metric called observed exposure. This is absolutely crucial. It's a measure of AI displacement risk that combines the theoretical capability of large language models with actual real-world usage data. It purposefully places a heavier weight on automated work-related uses rather than just casual, everyday augmentation. It perfectly bridges the gap between what AI can do in theory and what workers are actually doing with it in practice. So how do they actually build this metric? Well, they walk us through a really clever three-step methodology. Step 1 relies on ONET, which is a massive U.S. government database outlining tasks for around 800 unique occupations. Step 2 brings in task-level exposure estimates to determine if it's theoretically possible for an LLM to do a task twice as fast. And finally, Step 3 is the reality check. They bring in actual real-world Anthropic usage data, literally millions of Claude conversations, to see if that task is actually being automated in the real world right now. And this brilliantly illustrates the massive, crucial gap between what AI is theoretically capable of and its actual real-world adoption today. Just look at computer and math occupations. LLMs can theoretically handle 94% of the tasks, but the actual observed exposure, only 33%. For office and admin roles, there's a 90% theoretical capability, but actual usage is significantly lower. Why the massive gap? Well, it's mostly because of model limitations, legal constraints, specific software requirements, or human verification steps. Bottom line, AI is far from reaching its theoretical capability. Moving on to Section 3, the most exposed jobs. Let's profile the usual suspects. On the highly exposed side, cognitive and digital tasks completely dominate. Computer programmers top the list with 75% coverage. Customer service reps also rank incredibly high, since their tasks frequently show up in automated back-end software traffic. Data entry keyers sit at 67% coverage. But conversely, look at the unexposed jobs. Cooks, lifeguards, and mechanics are all sitting at 0%. Basically, if your job requires you to jump in a pool or hold a wrench, your AI exposure right now is entirely non-existent. So why does this observed exposure metric actually matter? Well, because it's already reflecting reality. When the researchers compared their coverage metric to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics projections for the next decade, they found a very clear link. For every 10 percentage point increase in actual AI coverage, the government's projected job growth drops by 0.6 percentage points. Put simply, jobs with higher observed AI exposure are already projected by the government to grow less over the next 10 years. Let's jump into Section 4, Who Faces the Most Risk, and get ready for a demographic subversion. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how the AI shock is entirely different from past industrial changes. Historically, automation threatened blue-collar physical labor, right? AI, however, is disproportionately threatening white-collar, higher-paid, and more educated demographics. Highly exposed workers actually earn 47% more on average. They are 16% more likely to be female, they tend to be older, highly educated, and more likely to be white or Asian. The unexposed workers, they're generally those with lower pay and a much higher likelihood of physical or in-person roles. To really hammer home this education divide, just consider this statistic: 17.4%. That is the percentage of the most exposed workers who hold graduate degrees. Compare that to the unexposed group, where only 4.5% hold graduate degrees. I mean, that's almost a four-fold difference. The takeaway here is pretty stark. The more education you have, the higher your likelihood of facing AI exposure. Finally, Section 5, Early Evidence on Employment. Let's get to the verdict. The researchers really needed to find undeniable proof of direct economic pain, so they specifically tracked unemployment as their priority metric. Job postings can be kind of misleading, you know? A decline in one area might be counteracted by openings in a related one. But a worker who is unemployed actively wants a job and hasn't found one. That is the absolute clearest signal of economic harm. And what did they find? 0%. There has been a 0% systematic increase in aggregate unemployment for highly exposed workers since the release of ChatGPT in late 2022. The trends between highly exposed workers and entirely unexposed workers have been largely identical, so those mass layoffs that everyone feared, they simply aren't happening in the aggregate data. But wait. As with all deep economic studies, there is a catch here. While we aren't seeing mass layoffs for established workers, the paper found a very nuanced trend in hiring, specifically affecting young workers trying to enter the labor market for the first time. 14%. That is the percentage drop in the job-finding rate for young workers aged 22 to 25 entering exposed occupations compared to 2022. Young workers are relatively less likely to be hired into these highly exposed digital and cognitive roles right now. This doesn't necessarily mean they're unemployed. They might just be taking different jobs or staying in school longer, but the hiring pipeline into these exposed professions has undeniably slowed down for the newest entrants. So the crucial point is this: AI just isn't causing a sudden tsunami of mass layoffs right now. A massive gap still remains between what AI is capable of and how businesses are actually using it today. The disruption we are seeing is incredibly stealthy. It's showing up as slowed hiring for young graduates entering the field, rather than firings of established experts. Moving forward, as AI deployment deepens, we absolutely have to track this observed exposure metric to separate the real signal from the noise. Which leaves us with a really critical question for you to ponder. When you look at your own daily tasks through the lens of observed exposure, what do you see? Are you actively using AI to augment your workflow and speed up your tasks? Or are you sitting back, waiting for it to eventually automate your role? The tools are here, and the transition is stealthy but steady. It's time to take a close look at your own professional toolkit. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.